Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for attending this A-List webinar on athletic recruitment for US colleges. My name is Sam. I'm the Director of Client Services for A-List, and I'm joined by my fantastic colleague, Mark, who is our in-house, guru, if you like, on student recruitment for college programs in athletics. Mark works with a lot of our students in sort of a very balanced way, looking at athletics, but also academics and advising on pathways that are available for student athletes. Is a really quite key part of the work that Mark does with us. So just while people are joining the call, I'll cover just a little bit of housekeeping of sort of what we're going to cover today. So we have a presentation for you. We're going to be discussing some more information on the pathways that are available for student athletes, the types of things that you need to be bearing in mind in this process, and how we, as a consultancy, can potentially help you. We will have the ability throughout the call for you to submit questions. So I would encourage you, if you have questions about these topics, to submit them through the Q&A function. I will be keeping an eye on those questions and moderating them as they come in. And we'll have time at the end of the presentation to answer those questions. I would just ask that they're kept on topic if possible. If they're sort of outside of this topic, we have all of your contact details, so we will get in touch with you after the webinar is completed. And then when we finish the webinar, we'll have details on the screen of how you can book a consultation call, either with myself or directly one-on-one with Mark, so that you can get a review of your situation and how we can potentially help. But I guess without further ado, I will hand over to Mark for the presentation.
Thank you, Sam, and pleased to be with you all this evening. Thanks for joining us. I was talking to Sam ahead of time. Part of the excitement of student athlete is that there is no experience that I think on a college campus here, university campus here in the States, that a student can have that mirrors or can rival being a student athlete, and that can be at any level. And let me start by saying we have designed a program here in the States over the years of sport that allow almost any student that has any interest in playing their sport to continue to play their sport. From the lowest level, my level, the intramural sport level, in which you just sort of play for fun on a weekend with your hall in your house or your residence hall, all the way to the NCAA Division I full scholarship level, in which you're playing, teams across the nation on ESPN and other things. So if you have a son or daughter, or if you are the student, if you play a sport and that is a vital part of who you are, there will be an opportunity for you to play in the States. Will that opportunity include having a coach being able to help you with admissions? Not necessarily. Will that passion for your sport allow you to get money to play your sport? Not in most cases, but to play the sport, absolutely. At the club level, at the intramural level, at the non-NCAA level, for sure. Let me start with a little housekeeping. When I refer to the college, it means college or university. That's a very American acronym that we, or not even acronym, just a very American term used to bunch everything together. It could be anything from a 2-year junior college to Harvard, we will call college. So if I say college, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not a university. When I say NCAA, that stands for the National Collegiate Athletic Association. They are the main governing body of sport in the US. They, at your level, will decide whether you've done enough academically to be eligible to play your sport. And then once you're at a college or university, they will continue to monitor student eligibility to play your sport. So that's some of the housekeeping. Another thing is, let me put some sobering thoughts out there first, and then I'll move to the optimistic. There are approximately around the world 8 million prospective student athletes. And by prospective student athletes, I mean students that are playing a sport, organized sport, for a club or for their college in the UK or high school here in the United States. There's 8 million of those. Of that, about 2% will go on to play Division I or Division II NCAA athletics, where scholarships are offered. About 10% will go on to play Division III, and then hundreds of thousands will go on to play club sports and intramural sport. So it's not an easy path to get in from where you're playing tennis or golf or soccer, sorry, football, at your school to playing in the United States will not be easy at the Division I or II level. It's a little easier if you can play at the Division III level, and you can certainly always play at the club level. And as a parent who had a student who played at the club level, I will tell you he competed at extremely often. He traveled around the country to compete against school. He went to the University of Florida here in my state. He competed against schools from UCLA to Notre Dame to Duke. He ended up training with our national team for a year after he graduated from college. And at that point, he realized he was not going to make it to the next level of being on our Olympic team. And he decided to get married instead, which his wife, who was a fencer, was very happy about as well, as he was a fencer. So that's the club sports. It can be extremely competitive. It can be extremely exciting. The difference is there's not much money available to those teams. They have to do a lot of fundraising, or my wife had to pay for a lot of his equipment. And the coaches at the club level cannot be advocates for you with the admissions office like they can at the NCAA level. So that is sort of a very quick overview of the options you have. If you're really, really good at the Division I level, you might already know that because coaches might have already contacted you. But for the most part, you don't know that yet, and coaches don't know you yet. So we'll talk a little bit about what is the strategy to get recruited. We can go to the next slide, Sam.
Sure.
Maybe. There we go. There are a lot of spots available, not all with scholarship, but there are a lot of roster spots available at the NCAA Division I and Division II level. This is just an overview of Division I. So there are on American football team, there are usually at the highest level when we're talking, University of Florida or Clemson, the big time American football teams that you've heard of, Notre Dame, Stanford, they have 105 players on that team. Of that 105, 85 are getting full scholarships. Okay. That is a revenue development sport in the United States. They bring money to their university. For instance, last year, the University of Indiana's football team brought in $54 million in revenue to the university after all of their expenses were paid. All of the other sports, except for basketball at Indiana University, lost money. So the reason there's 105 spots on a football team and 85 full-time full scholarships is because it makes money for the university. But there's a lot of spots available for soccer. Sorry, I mean, if you're football athletes, there's a lot for golf, 9 or 10. Volleyball is a growing sport. Track, but men and women, it's a co-ed sport. There's 45 spots available to be on a team, but there aren't 45 scholarships. There's about 26 scholarships available at Division I in track. So there are two types of scholarship sports in the States. There's full scholarship, which is football and basketball, and that's about it. And every other sport is what we call an equivalency sport. So the track coach at Stanford University has the equivalent of 26 full scholarships to give out to however many men and women he puts on his squad, up to 45. The tennis coach at Stanford has 4.5 full-time scholarships to give out to the 10 players on his team. So the idea of getting a full scholarship, unless you're playing American football or American basketball, is daunting, but not impossible. But later on, I'll tell you another way to add to your scholarships. So that is sort of an example of how many spots are available. There's more opportunities to play than there is money to give you. So if you are a family that does not need a scholarship, and as you go through the recruiting process, you know that you can pay the full cost of going to that university. And when we communicate that to a coach, it certainly can help you find a spot on that team. But I don't like advertising that too early. If you play a sport and work that hard, I like to see students get rewarded somehow. But yes, it does help if you don't need a scholarship because there are extra spots available on every team, even American football. We can go to the next slide, Sam. There are also sports that compete heavily that are not part of the NCAA, but kind of mirror how they go about the recruiting process. That includes men's rowing, which has a tremendous following here in the States, but for some reason is not a part of the NCAA, but they offer scholarships, they recruit, they do act as if they were an NCAA sport, they just aren't one. Squash is a small niche sport here, played at most of our very elite schools. Stanford, Harvard, Yale all have good squash teams. They also follow the NCAA pattern of how to recruit and how to offer scholarships, but they are not a member of the NCAA. Men's rugby, same thing. There are a few men's rugby varsity teams in which coaches and can offer scholarships and find you some help. But it's probably the fastest growing sport actually on the men's side in the United States. There are a few polo, not water polo. We have water polo as part of the NCAA. This is the polo on a horse that you all play. There are a few teams for polo, and they basically, if you can do it, you can be on the team. It's not a real active recruiting process. You just sort of show up and show your skills. The next sport to probably join the NCAA, I would say within the next 5 to 10 years, will be the sport of cricket, which first we have to understand how to play it. And once America understands how to play it, I think the NCAA might add it as it's becoming pretty attractive to our growing population here in the States. Scholarships act about the same as they do in NCAA sports. So as an athlete, if you're a man, if you have a boy that rows, don't worry about if it's not an NCAA or if it is an NCAA. It's moot. It acts about the same. They follow the same calendar, the same sort of rules and regulations. It's just that they have their own rowing association. And that's mostly because it's such a heavy Olympic sport. So we have revenue sports, non-revenue sports, and then what we call Olympic sports. Rowing is one of those Olympic sports. We can go to the next one, Sam, I think. Club sports, my favorite as a parent, but club sports is a tremendous opportunity, as I mentioned before, to be able to continue to play your sport, but where athletics remains the priority, where you don't have to necessarily be recruited. You just play at the school you're going to. When I work with students and build them a list of schools, I build a list of schools where they might be able to be recruited and another list of schools where they would be happy as a student, happy socially, happy geographically, but also have a club sport in the sport they play just so that makes them tip the balance between one school and another. And some schools have a tremendous amount of club teams. The University of Miami has 3 to 4 club tennis teams for men at different levels. Some that practice 5 days a week, some that practice 1 day a week, some where you compete around the country, and some where you're just competing around the South Florida area. So it really varies from school to school. Some have tryouts. A lot of the rugby teams, club rugby teams, just say show up, and if you're willing to get your head bashed in, go ahead and play rugby. It's fine. But there is club championships, there is club travel. The big difference in club sports between NCAA level sports is at the NCAA level, the coach has the ability, if he wants you or she wants you to be part of her team or his team, to advocate for you with admissions and to use spots to help you get into that university. We'll get to what it takes to do that in a few minutes. Where at the club level, they don't have any say in admissions. A lot of the club coaches are graduate students or people in the community. They're not part of the university necessarily. They might run a great program, but at a club level, the admissions office does not look at you as an athletic recruit. You're just any other student that's applying to that school. The other thing they don't have is any money to give you. So you might have to do fundraising and bake sales and other car washes. I know at my son's fencing team at the university did parking every Saturday for the football games, the University of Florida football games, which 90,000 people go to on a Saturday. He helped with parking, and they, people would tip them and stuff, and it would be how they raise money for their fencing team. So that is another great level that you can play. And then there are a lot of students who say it was great playing at a competitive level while I was at Wellington College or while I was at Eton or wherever, but when I go to university, I don't want to even think about sport until I get there, and maybe I'll just play pickup basketball or what we would call intramural sports. And intramural sports was my go-to when I was a student athlete. It allows you to build a team in about 20 or 30 different sports at most universities. Weird sports, everything from Quidditch to golf, frisbee golf, and you find a bunch of friends that want to be a team, and you compete against each other on the university campus, but not against other schools. It's just intramural. It's in your own school. So at the lowest level of sport, we do have intramural sports. It will not help you get into university. It will not get you any money, but it'll give you a great time when you're at school. And we do, and a lot of schools spend a lot of money financing their intramural sports in facilities, having good fields to play on, having time in the gym or the pool to play and to swim. So it is a great way also to stay in shape. So we can go to the next slide, Sam. So how does it work? So if you are a student athlete, how does it work to actually become one of those recruited student athletes? The first thing I think that's really important to remember is the term we use, student athlete. And when I use that term, I am talking not about American football, not necessarily about American basketball. I'm talking about all the other sports we offer at the NCAA level. You need to be a student first and an athlete second. I have worked probably with over 1,000 student athletes. And I'll tell you the first call I've ever gotten from a coach about every student athlete I've worked with at every level has been, how are they doing in school? Will they be able to get into my school, my college, or my university? That could be from Alabama football coach to the Harvard squash coach. It does not matter. That's the first question I've always got asked. Can the student get in? Because as a student athlete, you have to look like and do the same things and go through the same process as any other student. You have to have the same level of GCSEs, the same A levels or IB scores, predicted scores. You have to have an SAT or an ACT score that'll help you get into that university. So for instance, let's use Stanford University since I've been using it so much and everyone knows it. They receive about 60,000 applications a year for about 2,500 to 3,000 admission spots that they have. Very few students, less than 5% of the students who apply to Stanford get in. There's another 45% of the students who don't get in that on paper look just like the 5% that got in. Same GCSEs or grades, same A levels, same IBs, same scores in AP classes here in the States, same amazing SAT or ACT scores, but they got a no, and this 5% got a yes. Why did that 5% get a yes over the student gets a no? For some students, for about 200 to 300 students each year at Stanford, it's because a coach needed that student on his or her team. and had a spot and went to the admissions office and said, here, look at Johnny. He's got the same GCSEs. He's got grade A levels. He's taken great classes. He's got, a 1500 SAT score, and I really need him on my tennis team. Can I please have the spot for him? And the admissions office will bless it and say, yes, you can have that spot. And then Johnny moves into the 5% instead of into the 45% that look just like the 5% but get a no. So think of a coach as being your advocate on campus, someone who can push the button to help you get in. I have had a coach tell me, because I was working with a tennis player a few years ago, and the coach looked at his grades and said, this kid could play like Rafa Nadal, and I can't get him into Stanford. Okay. So you've got to be able to get in. Another thing coaches are good at looking at is not only can they get you in, but can you stay in? Can you do the work that's typical at that university? So they're looking at what classes you took. Did you challenge yourself? Just like any other student. The only difference being is you have someone on that campus that is singing your praises, that is saying that it's going to bring your gifts to the university, and that really think that you want to come here. So please, can the coach have that spot for you? They don't have a lot of spots in the non-football, non-basketball sports to use. So getting to that process always starts with being a student first. And when you look at the most elite schools, it's not easy for them to find not only the student that can get in, but the athlete that can play at Harvard, the athlete that can play at Duke or Stanford or Northwestern. That's very difficult. So if you can maintain your excellence in the classroom, you've automatically put yourself in a better recruiting spot than most of those 98% of high school kids that don't play the sport in college. That's the biggest way to get into the top 2% is to do your work in the classroom. The timeline for a student athlete starts earlier than it does for a typical non-athlete. Coaches really can't start communicating with you in any detail until after June 15th of your GCSE year, your year 12, our year 11. So as you're about to go into your sixth form, coaches can start talking to you. They can start actively recruiting you. They can follow you on social media. They can email and phone call with you on a regular basis. Each sport has a recruiting calendar, which talks about when coaches can communicate, when we have quiet periods, when recruiting slows down, and when we have something called dead periods where you won't hear from a coach. Those usually revolve around when you typically have exams and when you typically have holidays, like around Christmas, coaches have to take a break and leave you alone in the recruiting process. So it's important to know your sport and know that associated recruiting calendar. With my students, it's one of the first things we go through is I give them that recruiting calendar so they can put it into their calendar. Because if they don't hear from a coach for 2 weeks and they get nervous, why haven't I heard back from the coach? They'll at least know he can't talk to you or she can't talk to you during the month of the December and January during Christmas, New Year's time. So that is when things begin. Now, that doesn't mean you can't communicate with a coach earlier than June 15th of your GCSE year. You can start communicating as early as you want. What you'll receive back usually is a letter from a coach saying, hey, I can't talk to you, but fill out this questionnaire or come to my camp, which is huge. And we'll get to that in a second. And reminding you that they can't actively recruit you until June 15th. What I usually talk about students is June 15th for a lot of student athletes is the opportunity for the hunter to become the hunted. So you can start hunting way earlier than June 15th. But after June 15th is when you can be hunted, and that's what you want to do. You want to switch from being the hunter to the hunted. It's a year earlier than when your friends and your mates in school that aren't athletes are even thinking about admissions, right? It's June 15th of a year earlier than they are. So you need to be starting the recruiting process even a year before that. If I had my way, students that are starting in year 11 would start really actively doing the recruiting process. And if they couldn't year 10, why not? what you want to do is become familiar name to a coach. They receive, let me give an example. The Harvard soccer coach, Coach Josh Shapiro at Harvard, probably receives 200 to 300 emails a week from student athletes. Get perspective. I want to come to Harvard. I want to play. I want to play. He's not going to remember those names, but the more you communicate, the more you send video, the more you make yourself known, even before June 15th, the more likely it is that you will go through the recruiting process. Myths and facts. So the first fact you should know is be the best student you can be. Think about this going early, and the recruiting process is a grind. Okay, it is not, hey, I send out one email and send out one video, and all of a sudden I'm recruited. It's more like playing a massive game of whack-a-mole. Like, school pops up and maybe they need you, but then they go away. And, it is a lot of work. I usually say it's 100 hours of work between the student athlete and when I'm working with the student athlete and myself, getting you where you need to be recruited. There are very few student athletes that are recruited. Most student athletes recruit themselves. Okay, you see the pictures on TV of someone putting a school cap on and saying, this is where I'm going. That is, 1 to 5% of the student athletes that go to university. Everyone else is doing their own marketing for them. So it's important to understand you need to start early. It's a lot of work. Is it worth it? Yes. And that coaches are not always the best communicators. If there's any coaches out there, I apologize. But when you get 200 to 300 emails a day, it's tough to communicate. A week, it's tough to communicate. A month, it's tough to communicate. So it's up to us as a sort of your marketing team to help you make yourself as visible as possible. That's the first fact. Second fact we talked about already, scholarships. Scholarships for being an athlete, a full scholarships, saying, hey, I want a full ride to go to Harvard is never going to happen. First of all, Harvard and the Ivy League do not offer scholarships to students for athletics or academics. The only way they offer scholarships is based on family need, is how you get aid. So there is no scholarships to go to the Ivy League. At the other schools, getting a full athletic scholarship, unless you play basketball, American football, or beach volleyball right now, is very difficult to get. What we do, however, offer students is sometimes what we call a stacked, what you might hear from a coach, a stacked scholarship. And that is some money from the athletic department, some money from the academic department that you're trying to, go to, and maybe some money from admissions, international student scholarship, or some kind of grant that they make up where they can just put money together to get you as close to a good discount to come to our universities as possible. That is called stacking. And for most student athletes, for 90% of the student athletes, they're going to get a stacked scholarship offer, not a full athletic scholarship. Does it make admissions easier? Yes and no. Easier in that you have an advocate on campus if you get recruited? Yes. Easier in that you can have lower grades than a typical student that goes to that university? No. I had a student athlete that I'm very proud of that went to, that was recruited. He didn't have to send out any emails, basketball player. He was given 116 offers to come to their school with a full scholarship. He was a very good student. He narrowed it down to Stanford, Harvard, and Georgia Tech. He just wanted to study high level. Every week, the coaches from all three of those schools called me and said, how's he doing in the classroom? How's he doing on his SAT? How's he doing? I need to be able to get him in and keep him in at my school. This is basketball. He went on to Stanford, where he played for 4 years, and he's just finished his 12th year playing for the Dallas Mavericks. He has a degree from Stanford. He got into Stanford. He found the work fine because he worked really hard in high school to get that, to have those grades he needed to get into Stanford. He has told me numerous times that he doesn't, he's never worried about what will happen to him after he's done playing professionally. He has a degree from Stanford. He knows what to do. He has a degree in international relations from Stanford. He's going to be just fine. So easier admissions, yes, because you'll have a coach supporting you. That's my goal always, is to work with a student if they're going to play at the NCAA, to find one or two coaches that will actually say, I will support your application. Those are the magic words, meaning a coach is going to go into admissions and say, I need this kid. If you're playing at the club level, that's a whole nother thing. But I want you to have that, make admissions a little bit easier in that sense, but you still have to do all the work in the classroom. Enhancing your profile. Let's say you don't end up playing at the NCAA level, but you played a lot of sport in high school, in secondary school, prep school. Will it enhance your admissions profile? Absolutely. Admissions offices at the United States, at our colleges and universities, love student athletes. Even if you're not being recruited to play for their school, they still love seeing that you are an athlete. Why? Well, you usually took care of yourself, right? You're probably not doing drugs and alcohol and sitting up in your room playing video games all day and eating and being lazy. You're an athlete. You take care of your body. You've put yourself in harm's way. You know what it's like to win. You know what it's like to lose. You know what it's like to have a coach upset with you, just like a faculty member might get upset with you when you go to university. So yes, it enhances your profile, even if you're not recruited. So don't give up sport thinking that you can't play at college, because it's still going to help you with admission. And does it create a better experience? Absolutely. Again, using my son, he kills me every time I do this as an example. He was a fencer at the University of Florida. He never fenced till he got there. His 38 best friends were members of that fencing team. That was his University of Florida experience. Those 38 kids, probably not the 50,000 kids that went there, but those 38 were his best friends. His wife, because it was a co-ed team, came from the fencing team. Their 38 friends together. His wedding party, except for his brother, was all on the fencing team at the University of Florida. He is 40 years old now, and they still spend a week each year getting together and doing a pub crawl or this or going to games and stuff like that. And they're spread out across the country and the world. Will it create a better experience? Unlike any other experience there is. He talked about walking through an airport with the University of Florida, gear on, and carrying his swords and stuff in his bag, and people in airports around the country cheering on what they call the Gator cheer, which is Florida Gators, alligator clap. And he was just like, I'm just some kid that plays with swords. His experience was just uniquely different from other people who are not athletes. So don't give up, even at the club level. It can open up an experience for you that's unlike anything else that most schools offer. Go ahead, Sam. I know I'm speaking too long, but go ahead. How to start. This is easier than what I just talked about. The first thing is talk to your current coaches and ask them to be as honest with you as possible. Do they think you can be a recruited student athlete or get recruited to play in the United States? And please ask them to be as honest as possible. Then you got to make yourself visible. You got to write coaches. You got to respond to them when they ask you to come to showcases and camps. If you have the wherewithal and the time to come to the United States to campus-based camps and showcases where coaches can watch you play your sport, it is the greatest way to help yourself get recruited. You need to learn how to communicate to coaches, what to say, when to say it, when to update them, when to leave them alone. It's an art form that, quite frankly, I have developed over the years to be really good at that art form and pass it on to students. You have to register to be a student athlete with the NCAA. It's a half-hour process that we go through together. If you're doing well in school, you have nothing to worry about at this level. Just keep doing well in school. And then get help. Coaches can tell you, if you're good enough. Teachers can tell you what kind of school you learn well at, best at, because you might not be suited to go to a 50,000 student body campus. My kids sat in a classroom with 500 students. Okay, you might be better off in a classroom with 15 students. And then obviously experts like we have at A-List that can help you through the process. We start with you early. It's a grind. It's fun. I try to take as much stress away as possible and make it as fun as possible. But the idea that being a student athlete makes life easier is not. It's like being an actor or a musician where you have to both audition for the school and for, for the theater department or for the music department. You have to audition for a coach. So it's a double process, and that's why we start. That's why I like to start as early as possible. So Sam, I think I rambled for 35 minutes instead of 30. So I'll leave it to the next thing. How can we help? Well, obviously, we know every aspect of this process. It's nuanced, it's complicated, it's way more complicated than it needs to be, but it keeps me employed, so I appreciate that. Um, we obviously at A-List have help with the SAT or ACT, which scores have become, since COVID has passed, scores have become more needed. If you think you don't need to take an SAT or an ACT, think again. It can, even if you don't need to take it, it can help you. There are still schools that are test optional, but most schools would love to see a student athlete take the SAT or the ACT. We can create for you these personalized timeline. I do it with most of my students. What we're going to do month or season by season, fall, spring, or 3 years, 2 years, whatever that we can have with you. Obviously, we help with every essay, every personal statement, everything you need to do for the more complicated and more American US application, which is different than the UK application to university. And every student athlete, no matter how good you are, including my MBA All-Star, had to go through the application process just like every other student, just you had to do it earlier. And of course, we can help you understand what each school is offering, why each coach is different from another coach. The knowledge of some of these coaches comes in handy because that coach becomes a mentor, not just a coach. You spend so much time with your team, traveling in study halls, in residence halls, eating together, in the gym together, and the coach being with you. Is it the type of coach you like? Is it the type of coach that doesn't work for you? So that is sort of the idiot savant knowledge we bring to the process as well. And then Sam, we start with a private consultation, and I leave
Yeah,
it.
absolutely. That's usually the sort of the formal beginning of the process, really, just to understand where a student is at in the process and sort of what we can do to help them. I'm just going to bring up on the next slide, if you just bear with me
Yeah,
1 second.
sure. And while you're doing that, Sam, I will say my biggest takeaways from this, if I were going through all of this and realize that we're taping it so you can see it again, which is great. But the first thing is you need to be a student first and an athlete second. Okay, every sport you play, unless you play American football for some reason in the UK, you still have to be a student first, and even a football player has to be a football student athlete first. It's still student athlete, not athlete student. The second thing I would take away is you need to start early and you need to work hard at it. Okay, unless you're the most gifted, unless you're already an Olympian or already hearing from coaches, you have to do the work yourself. You have to make yourself visible. And quite frankly, you're an ocean away from where they're usually recruiting. So you even have to do more when you're further away as an international student. We have tremendous numbers of international students on all of our teams. So it doesn't hurt you, but it is a little bit more work. I say the third takeaway is whether a school says they're test optional or not, think about needing to take the SAT or ACT. And if you do, it's worth the investment to have a prep program to do that with, because scores have ballooned to average scores are amazingly high. The average score right now to go to the University of Florida is over a 1400 on the SAT. I will tell you 10 years ago, it was probably 1200. 20 years ago, it was probably 1100. So the scores have gone up at most of our schools. And then the fourth takeaway I would say is make sure if you have the real passion to do this, understand there's plenty of opportunities to play. There's plenty of pathways to play, but getting help doing it is going to make your life much more successful, your goal much more successful than trying to do it on your own. I think those to me would be the biggest takeaways.
Thanks, Mark. I thought it was really fascinating and just very useful as an overview. For those of you that are still attending, there's a couple of QR codes on the screen that you can use. The first one is to really just book a follow-up conversation. It's something that I would recommend. That's something that you can use to book a call with me in the client service team. I think that's probably especially useful if you're at the beginning of this process, just so that you can get an idea of what the process involves, and then that can potentially lead into sort of a more formal one-on-one consultation with Mark. So please do take advantage of that. And then the second one is just our sort of more broadly our webinar library. This is, I think, really useful. We have a lot of different topics that we cover, everything from how to ace an SAT to, what typically Ivy League admissions teams are looking for in their candidates at the moment. And, we have quite a range of different topics that we cover, and we're always hosting new webinars, so do keep an eye out for those. We'll move on to just a little bit of Q&A. Did have some questions, and Mark, this should be a familiar name to you. It's Tammy Parks asking the question. You mentioned cricket being sort of the next cab off the rank to NCAA admission.
Yeah.
Tammy was asking sort of where do you think this will take off? Is this an Ivy League thing? Is it Southern states? Is it the Northeast?
Right now, it's the Southeast. It's actually here in Florida, that where it's taken off. And South Florida is different than the rest of Florida. Yeah, I'm not in South Florida, but the Miami area is a very diverse area. It's probably the most diverse part of our country, with people that have come from all over the world to settle in South Florida. And a lot of those people came from countries with a cricket background. And the NCAA is always looking for what they call emerging sports. So cricket right now, the newest emerging sport has been triathlon. The next emerging sport that I anticipate might be cricket, because most schools have the fields and grounds for it. They have baseball fields, and we have stuff we can use. I think the United States just has to get more used to the sport and understand what the heck is going on, and then maybe we'll do that. I always tell my students, if I help you get into your dream school, you got to teach me cricket. No one's done it so far, and they've gotten into their dream school. So I have a lot of people that haven't been able to teach me. So, but I do see that probably, I would say 5 to 10 years down the road, assuming that our universities stay the same, sports stay the same. So many things are changing on a regular basis. One thing I didn't mention that has changed is the NCAA used to allow students to get a 5-year scholarship, 5 years worth of scholarship, 4 years worth to play their sport. They're now giving every student athlete at the NCAA and Division I and II level 5 years to play their sport. So everyone will have a chance to play for 5 years and a scholarship that can last 5 years. Why 5 years? Is the average American student athlete cannot graduate within the 4-year period because their seasons and they can't take the full course load, and sometimes it takes 5 years. This will make it more affordable for student athletes and give them 5 years to go to university and continue to play their sport. So that's the biggest news coming down the line from the NCAA. That associated with that, you will need to be able to start your schooling and play your sport by the time you're 19. So if you want to take a gap year, that's fine for most sports, but you have to start to get that 5 years before your 20th birthday. So
I'm always happy to talk about the rules of Test cricket with you, Mark, if we find it. But the thing is, I think it might need a whole afternoon, and when you have variables like the degradation of the pitch and whether it can take a bit of time. But always a pleasure.
I quite frankly, Sam, I think it requires me coming over to the UK so I can learn it. We jokingly refer to it here as baseball on Valium. So yeah.
One of the things that when I'm approached by parents who are looking to tackle this process, I think there's sort of two concerns that always come up quite early on in the conversation. I think the first is sort of trying to understand where someone sits in the timeline. And,
Yep.
when we talk about how early, is there such a thing as being too early? And then I guess the second thing is sort of that increasing importance of SAT and just
Yeah.
sort of what's driving that from the college level, really.
Okay, so let's start with for a student athlete. I think there is too early. I think starting before you start your year 10, our grade 9 is a little bit too early. They're
Right.
not going to look at anything grade-wise until you get a GCSE score and predicted A levels or IB scores. That's what they're going to make their judgment on. Anything that happened before that, oh, when you were in grade 7, you won some sort of award, they're not going to care about. They're only going to count things that happened from year 10 on as part of your admissions profile. As an athlete, I think if you have the wherewithal and the time, the earlier you can start, starting in year 10 on, the better. Coaches usually recruit a year or two ahead of them. If I were to call, again, using Stanford, if I were to call the Stanford tennis coach right now, he would say his 2027 class is full. He already
Mm.
knows who's recruited for 2027. So he's looking at 2028. So you need to be thinking a year, hopefully 2 years at least earlier than when you're going to leave school and go off to university. And the second part, Sam, I forgot again.
Well, we might come
Oh,
back to that because
SAT,
we've
SAT.
just had a new question come through actually
Okay,
from one of our attendees. So
okay.
this is from Helen, and Helen
Okay.
asks, our son plays tennis and he finishes his A levels when he's 17 years old. He
Now,
wants to do chemical engineering at university, and he's considering having a gap year before applying to the US as a student athlete. Is it okay to have a gap year? How do colleges typically view gap years?
so the admissions offices love gap years, especially when you're 17 or and younger. They love having that extra year to mature and to be more ready for the challenges of being a student, not just in the classroom, but outside the classroom. The NCAA allows every sport except tennis to have a full year of what they call delayed enrollment. And by delayed enrollment, that means a gap year. Okay, that you're delaying your start for 1 year. In tennis, they only allow a 6 month delayed enrollment. So if you're somewhere to take a gap year, by January of the follow of that gap year, they would expect them to either enroll at university or stop playing competitive events. He can still be recruited, he can still train, he just can't play competitively. Now, take that with a grain of salt because every student athlete in tennis that I've worked with, and trust me, I have worked with hundreds in tennis, probably more than any other sport, um, who's wanted to take an extra few months because they're a junior athlete and they're taking a gap year. All you need, if the NCAA is going to say you have to stop, all you need is one university to put in what's called a waiver for you to continue to play. And unless you are, you know, unless you're, Sinner or Alcaraz or someone at that level, they're going to grant you that extra 6 months. So while I have to say it legally, yes, you're not allowed a full year of delayed enrollment. Don't worry about it. You're delayed. You can get a full year of delayed enrollment. And would it help you? Coaches love it. Admissions offices love it. If you're a student who's willing to do it, it can only make you better. But it has to be a productive gap year. It can't just be I'm going to play my sport that gap year. You have to do other things productive as well. Can you do some charity work? Can you do some internship at work? Can you have a really productive gap year, even if the main reason you're doing it is to continue to build your ITF ranking or UTR ranking, it should be productive as well.
Thanks, Mark, and thanks, Helen, for the question. Um, I guess my sort of perhaps final question before we close things off is just that importance of the SAT and sort of what's
Yep.
been driving that at the college level. And I know that when I speak to families, they often ask me, are there concessions to be made if there's a possibility for, a student to get a soccer offer or, a rowing offer? Will universities be sort of less strict in their requirements? Is there opportunities to get those requirements downgraded slightly?
I would say it's school by school. And sometimes schools are in various conferences, like the Ivy League is really an athletic conference of 8 schools. Okay. And that's how it began, more for athletics than it did for anything to distinguish them academically. And each conference has their own rule. When many of our schools went test optional during COVID, for obvious reasons. You couldn't get to a test site to take the test. Most of those schools have gone back from being test optional to being test required. Um, my sentiment is, unless there's a compelling reason that you can't take the test. For instance, I was working with a girl in a country in Africa, and they didn't offer it in her country, and they wouldn't let her fly out of the country. Schools understood this, and test optional was really test optional. If you're not looking at the Division III level, which most of our test optional schools are, if you're looking at the Division I level, then I would say it behooves you to prepare for taking the SAT or the ACT. Why do schools do it? It's a good question. I'm not a fan of standardized testings, but when you're the University of Florida and you get 95,000 applications for 5,000 spots, you're going to go through how can you judge these students, and they all do well in school and they all do amazing extracurricular stuff and charity work. It's just one more piece to the puzzle that isn't AI that they can look at and say this is genuinely something about this student. So it does provide you an opportunity. The other thing it provides is, when I talked about stacked scholarships, the better you can do on an SAT, even for SAT optional schools, if you do really well, it gives the admissions office motivation to give you money based on how well you did on the SAT, or if you're in a non-English speaking on the TOEFL exam. All of that can come in handy to help build an academic stacked scholarship to go along with your athletic scholarship. They know you're coming. If you're coming from the UK, they know they have to that they're competing against 3 years and a much more affordable higher education than we have here in the States. So they know that's what you're comparing it to. So they're going to look at trying to make it as affordable. The other reason they want to see you take the SAT as an international student is our schools, most of our good schools, most of the ones that everyone probably watching this webinar is looking at, are schools that are no longer judging themselves based solely on how many they can say yes to and how many they can say no to. They're looking at how many students they say yes to say yes back to them. Like, if I'm going to use an admission spot on you, are you really going to come to my school? And when you're coming from a foreign country, when you're coming miles away, taking the SAT shows some sort of motivation that, you know what, he or she is willing to come across the ocean and come to university. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing all this work on the SAT. So it's another feather in your cap of, hey, you're really going to come to my university. You want to show that school that if they ask you out, you're going to say yes. And if the best way to do that is to give them every reason to think that's where you want to go to school, and the SAT is one of those first reasons that you will come across the country, come across the ocean and go to America. Yeah, even now, you come to America.
Thanks, Mark. I would just add to that as well for everyone on the call that we have a range of SAT courses taking place this summer, which are, I think, an excellent crash course in the exam. We regularly see students on those courses improve their SAT score by 150 to 200 points in the space of 5 days, which isn't easy. That's it's a very intensive week, but it's a week that's aimed to really bolster those results and really nail down that technique of what it takes to approach the test in the right way and to sort of minimize those errors and weaknesses in the overall test and achieve your score target. So if you're interested to learn about that, please use the QR code on the screen. I'll be happy to talk to you about those courses as well. Mark, I think that's going to be everything today.
Okay.
I think this has been a really fantastic and very productive and informative webinar. I'd like to thank you for joining me and delivering it. I thought it was really fascinating. And I'm
Thank
sure
you
we'll
all
have
for
you on
having me.
again soon.
Appreciate it. Thank you all for having me. Keep up the hard work in the classroom. Control the things you can control. You can control how you do in school. Do the best you can do, and the athletic part will find its place.
Thank you, Mark. And thank you to everyone that's attended. We really do appreciate you attending these webinars. We'd love to give you more information. If you're interested to learn more, please feel free to book a call with us. We will be reaching out to you after the webinar is completed just to see if we can help with anything. But thank you so much for joining us. Goodbye from myself, from Mark, and all of us at A-List, and we'll see you on the next webinar. Thank you. Bye-bye.